On World News Tonight this Friday, the Florida Supreme Court gets deeply involved in the presidential election. There will be no election result this weekend. The absentee ballots will be counted in Florida by the weekend. What difference will they make? The president is in Vietnam. Vietnam, he said, is a country, not a war. And 18,000 Americans who served their country, first forgotten and now found.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
Good evening. There will be no final result in the presidential election this weekend. The Supreme Court in Florida said late today that the results may not be certified tomorrow. The heavily Democratic counties may continue to recount the vote, and the people of Florida, without the court's decision, will have another weekend at least to dispute the fairness of it all. There it is, the Supreme Court building in Tallahassee tonight, and it may be a bit glib to say so, but in the halls of that Supreme Court, in fact, in much of Florida tonight, they've switched their attention from the presidential election to the Florida State football game this weekend. But in terms of politics, this is a chess game in Florida, and while it looked today as if Mr. Bush was in a very strong position to prevail under the law, the state's most important judges said they want to hear all of the arguments. ABC's Erin Hayes is in Tallahassee still tonight. Erin.
Peter, it has been another whiplash kind of day here in the Florida courts. The Supreme Court's order now means that Florida's Secretary of State, Katherine Harris, may not do tomorrow what she had fully intended to do, finally certify this election.
She is enjoined until further order of the court from certifying the results of the election.
It means this round goes to Vice President Gore.
This election is a matter that must be decided by the will of the people as expressed under the rule of law.
The move swiftly snatched away from Republicans their own short-lived victory earlier today, when a lower court judge ruled Secretary of State Katherine Harris could certify the election tomorrow.
It appears that the Secretary has exercised her reasoned judgment.
Secretary Harris had made it clear she would not accept these late votes, but the Supreme Court order means she may have to. The justices gave no indication how they feel about the legitimacy of these votes, but they did deliver a clear mandate to counties to keep on working, keep on counting, at least until the Supreme Court hears the arguments Monday. The Democrats' chances?
This decision takes the agenda away from the Secretary of State, puts it in the courts where the Democrats feel they have a very strong case, allows them to potentially win the whole ball game, and does it very quickly.
For many involved in the counts, this changed everything. In Dade County, where they had not yet decided whether to proceed with a recount, the announcement brought cheers and a decision to go ahead. But that kind of emotion, Republicans are sure to argue Monday, is part of the reason they do not trust this recount, one they say is subject to mistakes and confusion.
I know one fella dropped some ballots and everybody was kind of hooting and hollering at him.
Many people have thought here for some days that this would have to be finally settled in the courts. It is appearing more and more likely that it will. And Peter, one more thing. We are told that Secretary of State Katherine Harris, upon hearing of the Supreme Court's order, said to her staff, how many more things can happen in one day?
Precisely. Thanks very much, Erin Hayes in Tallahassee. By the way, at the federal level late today, the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals in Atlanta, responsible for Florida, has denied the Bush campaign request to stop the hand counting in Florida. The court may still consider whether these manual recounts are unconstitutional. Now let's talk to our reporters with the campaign, ABC's Terry Moran and Dean Reynolds. First, Dean Reynolds. Very much an up-and-down day for the Bush campaign.
No question, Peter. I think it was high fives in the morning for the Bush people, and it must have been heavy sighs this afternoon. The governor heard the results of the Supreme Court decision just as he was about to arrive at the governor's mansion in Austin, coming back from his ranch in Crawford. He went off almost immediately then to work out at the University of Texas. Having him here in Austin, though, certainly put him in a position to accept what he hoped would be the certification of his victory on Saturday. Now that's not going to happen, and he's looking forward to a rather frustrating weekend, I suspect.
Dean, a lot of the campaign surrogates for Mr. Gore were putting it around that he was going to have a big celebration tomorrow. I gather that was never in the cards.
Well, there were some preliminary inquiries about hotel rooms, but those were hotel rooms they were thinking of holding on to well into next week. It was purely speculative, and they said, look, we were caught dancing in the streets last week, and we didn't want to be burned again.
Okay, thanks very much, Dean Reynolds, who is still in Austin. Now let's go to Terry Moran, who has been with the Vice President in Washington all today. Terry, same thing to you, up and down all day.
Completely, Peter. It's been an emotional roller coaster for the Gore people. You talk to them 1 hour and you hear a tone of resignation, kind of low-key determination perhaps, and then the next hour they're ecstatic. They're filled with a kind of giddy energy. But one thing remains constant, and that is that they want the counting to continue. And that's what you heard from the Vice President in his statement here just a few hours ago.
The citizens of Florida surely want the candidate who received the most votes in Florida to be determined the winner of that state. That's why I'm very pleased that the hand counts are continuing. They're proceeding despite efforts to obstruct them. Neither Governor Bush, nor the Florida Secretary of State, nor I will be the arbiter of this election.
Now, the notable thing in that statement was that Vice President Gore toughened his rhetoric. He accused Republican officials in the Bush camp in Florida of trying to obstruct the counting of votes.
Thanks very much, Terry Moran. Indeed, we heard it. Wonder how much the country is listening. We, by the way, try to avoid labeling people this week, but here's a quick take-up on the makeup of the Florida Supreme Court. There are 7 justices. 6 were appointed by Democratic governors. Our legal analyst in Florida tells us that only one of the justices is considered to be a liberal. The rest are regarded as moderate to conservative. The court has been engaged in a running battle with the Florida legislature, which has a Republican majority, over separation of powers, judicial versus legislative. The court may have stopped certification of Florida's vote for now, but those overseas ballots will be counted by tomorrow. We do not yet know how they will affect the outcome of the election. But here is the latest statewide tally according to our political unit, and that will be a number that changes gradually over the weekend. ABC's Linda Douglas is now with us from Tallahassee. Linda.
Peter, there are battles going on in county offices all over the state right now. We've heard reports of county officials screaming at each other as Democrats and Republicans go to the mat for every overseas absentee vote.
In Arcadia, there were just 4 overseas absentee ballots to count, and there was a big fight over every one.
Yeah, it's amazing. We've gotten, the national media, the Gore, the Bush campaigns coming in personally.
In Seminole County, officials steeled themselves to count 166 votes, votes nobody would have paid attention to in years past.
And with numbers like that, normally it would take us about 2 hours, so plan to be here all day.
No address. It was the same in Duval County, where there are nearly 600 overseas ballots. Representatives of the political parties compared each voter's signature on the ballot envelope with the official signature in the computer. Dozens of ballots were rejected.
We had some that came back and they weren't signed, but they were witnessed. We had some that came back that were signed and no witness.
In Leon County, officials were relieved when they finally found one issue they could agree on.
And none of these people are registered in Leon County.
Okay. Well, in that case, I move we reject these.
As some smaller counties began reporting results, George W. Bush inched ahead of Al Gore. Republicans kept a close eye on ballots being trucked in from military personnel. Counties with big military populations report that requests for absentee ballots were twice what they were 4 years ago, thanks to an aggressive recruitment campaign by the GOP.
This is the signature we have on file for the voter. This is what they wrote down. As far as we're concerned, it doesn't match.
Never before have the votes that come in after Election Day been so closely scrutinized. In Miami, officials prepared to throw half the votes out.
Now, it appears that some of the decisions that are being made by the counties are very subjective. For example, in one county, officials decided that if a ballot came in from overseas with no postmark and it arrived 2 days after the election, well, it was probably sent at election time, so it would count. So, Peter, it is very likely that many of these absentee ballots will wind up in matters that are where everything else goes here in Florida, the courts.
Thanks very much, Linda. Interesting faith in the post office. Our polling unit has taken the country's temperature on all this again. The process is beginning to wear on many people. 57% tell us it's more important to get this over quickly rather than having it argued in court. 40% say it is more important for the campaigns to have a full hearing. We also find people less confident with the accuracy of the Florida count. Only 50% of people now. 4 days ago, it was 59%. Now, we've all been consumed by the numbers this week, including speculation about the Electoral College. Our polling unit has sliced it and diced it many ways. They did this for a little sport today based on election results in all the states. If only men throughout the country had a say in this, Governor Bush would have a landslide in the Electoral College with 437 votes. Mr. Gore would get 101. If only women voted, Mr. Gore would be the clear winner with 369 votes and 163 for Mr. Bush. On a slightly more serious note, it does say something about how the country is divided. Now, just ahead in the program, a slightly different look at the Florida melting pot.
There are very few traditions and roots here. It's like a crowd of strangers.
And later in the broadcast, thousands of men who history ignored.
This is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings. Brought to you by MSN.
Well, only in Florida. For more than a week, we've all found ourselves saying that repeatedly. The state is so diverse, politically and culturally, and it's impossible not to notice that well beyond the lawyers and the politicians scurrying about, Florida has a remarkable kinetic energy all its own. Here's ABC's Aaron Brown.
Like the water that surrounds most of it, rolling in and rolling out, change is the only constant in Florida. Sam Gibbons is nearly an endangered species, a native.
If I walk down the street and stop 10 people, how many of those 10 people do you think would be natives?
About one. That's close. Only 30% of Floridians are natives. No state has fewer. A retired congressman, Gibbons gave a civics lesson in a portable classroom. Another sign of growth too fast. Growing politically moderate, Central Florida is becoming the Midwest with better weather.
Used to be the young farmer, now it's a young business person.
Farther south in the Everglades between Tampa and Miami, John Cattell Vasquez is the new South Floridian. Native Costa Rican, works hard, typical. Okay, not exactly typical. Cattell deals with alligators.
When you're in there and you feel any fear whatsoever, your best bet is not to go in.
The gators you see are not happy. They are running out of room. The mysterious Everglades in danger. Gators deal with rapid change about as well as people. Farther south, it's not just your grandma's Miami anymore.
It's like a crowd of strangers. People all came from somewhere else.
A crowd, not a community. Dramatic change. The flood of exiles and immigrants alongside the remaining retirees. The young and beautiful, the scoundrels, the grifters, drug dealers, and the occasional deposed dictator. Bright lights, nightlife, Johnny cans, pots and pans. You won't find this in North Florida.
You can't get Cuban coffee there, and there are no bagels, and there's something called grits.
Way north, you're Tallahassee, in Crawfordville, Wakulla County. They don't even sound the same.
Y'all don't know where I live. My door's not locked at my house right now. I don't have to worry about that.
North Florida is the Deep South, very conservative, very Christian, though most people have a second religion, football.
Everyone around here, you know, you're either a Gator or Seminole. Miami don't factor in a whole lot up here.
Tomorrow's game, Florida and Florida State, is more the talk than the election. It seems the only thing that binds these distinctly different Floridas these days is a growing weariness, perhaps embarrassment. Understandable after 10 days in the intense national spotlight. They're starting to feel a bit like cattail, riding some dangerous beast, hoping that 2 weeks from now, Florida's image escapes intact. Aaron Brown, ABC News, Miami.